program. Today, we will be talking about the NTPEP audits of elastomeric bridge bearing manufacturing facilities. Before we get into that, I think most of you are aware of the NTPEP program, but as I talk to people around the country, I find there are still some misconceptions about how the program works. So before we get started, let's talk a little bit about NTPEP in general. The next slide, please. The National Transportation Product Evaluation Program is a technical service program that reports to the AASHTO Council on Highways and Streets. And NTPEP is a partnership between the member states and industry. It's responsible for evaluation and/or audits of 26 different product types or categories and growing. Some examples of product evaluations are pavement marking materials, rapid set concrete patching materials, erosion control products, and others. Some examples of manufacturing facility audits are guardrail, thermoplastic pipe, and of course the subject of today's presentation, which is elastomeric bridge bearings. The next slide, please. So the way it works is the technical committee is developed and develops a work plan that describes a product evaluation or a facility audit for the given product category. Currently, there's 24 technical committees, and those technical committees are made up of state representatives with non-voting input from industry. The work plans are then balloted to the member states for acceptance. Manufacturers submit their products to be evaluated or their facilities to be audited, and they pay a fee that covers the cost of that evaluation or audit. Product evaluations are performed by testing firms or state agencies that are under contract to NTPEP, and audits are performed by NTPEP contractors, most of which are former employees of member DOTs. States benefit in at least two ways. First, if your state is currently performing in-house evaluations, then you can save the cost in man hours by reducing the testing that you're conducting with your own forces. If you currently send someone to a manufacturing facility to check on their quality control plans and procedures, then you can instead rely on the audits performed by NTPEP. The second way to benefit is if you currently accept products by receipt of certification or certified testing, manufacturer's testing, NTPEP can help you improve your level of confidence by providing unbiased evaluations of those products. NTPEP provides facility audits that can add to your confidence in the manufacturing facility as well. Next slide, please. Actually, I jumped ahead of myself here, but what I wanted to say is, so we have NTPEP work plans that are designed by, reviewed by, and balloted to the member states. And we have testing facilities and auditors who work for NTPEP, and you guys are all members of NTPEP. So basically, this is your program. On this slide here, we're going to look at the agenda for today. The presentation will cover the NTPEP audits, and in particular the elastomeric bridge bearing program. You'll hear about the audit process, where to find the audit documentation and data mine. You'll hear some examples of how other states are using the elastomeric bridge bearing audits and how they have benefited from using those audits. And then you'll hear about how you can adopt this program for use in your state. And we have a few poll questions scattered throughout the webinar, so we're going to do one right now. The question is, what is your role at your agency? Are you in design, construction, materials, or other? And then we'll take a minute or two to get your answers on that.
And here's the results from the poll.
Okay, so looks like we're mostly materials people here today. Good to know who your audience is. We're going to pass this over to Aaron now.
All right, thanks, Bill. We'll start with committee introductions. So as I said, or as Bill said, my name is Aaron Bonk. I'm the chair of the NTPEP EBB committee. I'll be leading the conversation for the next number of slides. I work with Wisconsin DOT. I've been the chair of this committee for approximately the last 2 years after serving as its vice chair for the previous 6. Joe Stillwell from Maine DOT will be presenting a bit later. Joe has been a great asset to this program and the TC in his vice chair role over the last 2 years and was a contributing member many years before. Matt Blumen, who introduced us today here or started us off, is our AASHTO NTPEP liaison to this committee. And finally, Robert Sarsanella, or SARS as we refer to him as, and Ray Rowden are the 2 NTPEP EBB auditors that we work most closely with. You'll hear more from SARS in a little bit. SARS and Ray are invaluable to this program as they have had careers working in depth in different materials and testing, and are our eyes and ears during the audits when they're conducted at the bearing facilities. Next slide. So as far as the technical committee goes, there are another 12 states that have active members involved. So we have solid involvement from around the country. Those states include Alabama, Illinois, Indiana, Iowa, Kansas, Massachusetts, New York, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Rhode Island, Tennessee, and Texas. Additionally, we have a number of industry representatives from numerous different bearing manufacturers from around the country that are very active with this TC as well, and those manufacturers are listed on this slide. Next slide. So now that you have a little bit of familiarity with the makeup of the TC, we'll move into the second agenda item and start to discuss the purpose of NTPEP program audits, and more specifically, how EBB fits within NTPEP. So at a high level, as Bill mentioned earlier, AASHTO NTPEP audits are intended to evaluate the manufacturer's quality system and validate their QC testing. Additionally, these audit programs perform on-site or now in many cases virtual audits and annual random product testing. None of what I just stated is specific to the EBB program, but it applies to all of our NTPEP audit programs. From the evaluation of manufacturers' processes and the auditing and testing, state DOTs are then able to utilize this information as a part of their own state quality assurance programs in any number of ways. One of the main ways that state DOTs use this information gathered includes establishing either a qualified manufacturer list or a QPL or APL for a given product. Next slide. So before moving further into the presentation, I'd like to do a quick poll question to get a feel for whether the people in states on this call do maintain a QPL or APL for elastomeric bridge bearings in general right now. So please respond to the poll question on this slide with the answer that most closely aligns with your state's current practice. Okay. At least I'm seeing the results. Hopefully others are as well. So it looks like a little more than half do have a QPL or APL for these members. It's good to know. Good to have that insight as we move forward through this presentation as well as we assess our program moving forward. Next slide, Matt. So before discussing what NTPEP audit programs will do for your particular state, let's clarify what they are not. AASHTO NTPEP audit programs are not to be confused with or used as QC inspections for states and aren't intended to provide data that gives the exact pass-fail criteria to utilize for state approvals on a project-by-project basis. However, many states will obtain a significant amount of information and data that can be used in order to make informed decisions within the confines of the requirements that each of your states has in place. Additionally, material traceability information is provided through these audits, so you as states can ensure that federal requirements are met. Next slide. So SARS is going to cover how elastomeric bridge bearing audits work in more detail in a little bit, but I did want to mention that the NTPEP program does have a standard practice that we utilize as a baseline to conduct all of our audits. This page or this document on this page is referred to as SP01 and can be found under the documents section of the NTPEP webpage. This is the standard practice that covers auditing requirements, testing criteria, and is to be used along with the specific work plans for each of the individual audit programs. And the elastomeric bridge bearings program that we're talking about today falls in line with that as well. Next slide. So let's touch on the types of products that are currently part of the elastomeric bridge bearings audit program. In addition to the types of bearings, I'll also let you know what manufacturers are involved. So currently the EBB program facilitates the lab testing and manufacturing audits for both plain and laminated elastomeric bridge bearings. The AASHTO standard spec that we adhere to within this program is AASHTO M251. I'd like to mention that our TC for this NTPEP audit program is intimately involved and has the ability to work with others to modify AASHTO specs that benefit all states and manufacturers. Over the last couple of years, the NTPEP EBB Technical Committee has worked hand in hand with members of both the COMP TS4E and COBS T2 committees to put forth a rewrite of AASHTO M251. This work is currently in its final stages of gaining acceptance, and we hope that our joint proposal moves forward to implementation soon. We view this ability to work tightly with other AASHTO committees as a big benefit to states and manufacturers alike, and believe that it leads to a better overall auditing program for NTPEP related to elastomeric bridge bearings and should benefit each of you within your states. Next slide. So in addition to working collaboratively with AASHTO and other state DOT staff, this committee also works closely with many of the bearing manufacturers throughout the country. In 2021, we expect to have 8 different bearing manufacturers and 10 different facilities audited as a part of this program. Please give the list on this slide a close review. If your state has other bearing manufacturers that supply for your projects, I'd appreciate it if you could input those additional manufacturer names within the chat box for this webinar. Another option outside of using the chat box during this presentation would be to email me personally, and I've placed my email on this slide for use in doing so. Ultimately, industry has largely bought into this program and sees the value in it. Part of the reason for this buy-in is that our program sets a minimum standard for every manufacturer to meet. Additionally, since most of the main manufacturers have bought into the program, as they see more state involvement, it is viewed as a better return on their investment. So we'll get more and more buy-in on their side. One of the main reasons for us putting on this webinar is really to try to engage more states in realizing the benefits of this program as well in order to match industry's backing of the program. Next slide. So I'm going to turn over the presenting to Sars now, and he's going to walk us all through some of the details of the NTPEP elastomeric bridge bearing audit process itself.
Thank you, Aaron. I'd like to get everybody to cinch yourselves down in your seats and get ready for a wild, fast, and woolly ride through all of this. So we'll get through it all. I'm going to talk about the details of the audit process, as Aaron said. And I've broken it up into talking about some initial, how things kind of get started for an audit program, and then really where the audit program really focuses on. It's going to get into talking about the processes that's involved. And then, we're going to talk about the samples that we take and the information that we get from that and what we're looking at. So the program itself is basically broken down into the following areas. Like I said, the initial, how this whole process generally works is it starts with the manufacturer. Manufacturer goes ahead and submits an application through the online system that we have. And that's how they get their initial information submitted. And then we start reviewing it. We review their submittals and take a look at all that stuff against the standard things that we have set up within NetPEP to review and audit. Once we review it and get them set, then they're put into queue for their auditing. We basically handle audits on a cycle throughout the United States. So as that location shows up on our cycle, then generally they're programmed in at that time. And prior to the audit, the NetPEP audit team or our headquarters office will go ahead and notify the manufacturers of the audit date, and also the DOT personnel that are tied into NetPEP are notified if their location is near to where that facility is going to be. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. We got a poll question again. Can never have enough of these. So get set, get ready to mark A, B, or C to this question. Has anyone from your state attended a NetPEP audit for any particular product that we have out there? And this could be attending either an on-site audit or doing some of the virtual ones that we've been having to do during the past year or so. So go ahead and pick yes, no, or I don't know. And we'll see what the answers come out as. And there you go. All right. Well, it's good to see that we got almost half of y'all have been on an audit or seen what we do. And those of you who don't know, boy, are you in for a treat. We'll go ahead and talk about some of this stuff. And believe me, we highly encourage you to contact NetPEP headquarters, contact us. We'll be more than happy to get you involved with an audit in some form or fashion so you can see what we do. Next, I'd like to go ahead and discuss the focus of the NetPEP audits. What we're doing when we go to the manufacturer is we're looking at their whole process. So it's going to start from where their raw materials come in through the fabrication of the item on through to the completed product as it goes on out the door. And what we're looking at is we're looking at products in an audit program that are used by the state DOTs and also are referenced back to the same common product spec. For this particular one, it would be AASHTO M251. So you're looking at what's in that specification, specifically that product specification is what we have covered by the program. Okay. And next, one of the things that we're involved in, of course, you know, being government agency, we're always going to look at records, and that's what we do. And we get into the detail of the records, how they're keeping them. And also we're looking at the frequency, especially with the testing and or the inspections that they're doing for the different products to see that they're doing at least the minimum of what's required, or in most cases, what's detailed in the work plan. And then we'll move on. Next, we'll be looking at the actual quality control. We're looking, as it shows there, the performance. In other words, how do they perform the tests? How do they perform the inspections? Are they using proper techniques? Are they covering all the aspects that are noted within the specifications? And are they using the proper equipment? And then we're also taking a look at that equipment to see, is it good in good working order? Are they doing what they're saying that they do as tied back to their quality manual? And then we also gather informational stuff as part of the audit, because when you look at these audit reports that we generate, we want you to actually feel like you've been on the audit. So there's a lot of good information. And I would highly encourage you, when you get a chance, to go out and look at the audit information that's available in the completed reports. But we'll list in there what products they're currently producing. We'll also cover a lot of aspects of their quality management system and record retention, you know, how they keep their own internal audits, their calibrations, verifications that they do on the equipment, any management reviews that they may do, corrective actions that they themselves run into and initiate. And so we go through and we verify that all that kind of stuff is taken care of, and then detail that in a particular audit report that we have. Okay. Next area that we take a look at is the testing personnel. And that's very important because it's the testing personnel that are basically determining whether or not the product meets or not. So we're looking very closely at their training, and we're also looking at their competency evaluations. Anybody familiar with what you have to do in your laboratories with respect to resource and that, it's kind of along that same idea. We're looking at the detail of the training, and we're looking at the competency. We consider training to be that period of time that the technicians are doing their understanding of the test. And then once they're turned loose, then we're looking for at least an annual competency check to make sure they're still able to perform those tests. And then also with each of the products that we have, how is the product after it's manufactured? How's it identified? How are you able to know that that product came from that particular manufacturer? And then also, how do they keep up with identity of the material from raw material on through to the finished product? So we look for those things, and that information is also detailed in the reports. And that's some of the information you can pass along to your field inspectors so that they can make sure that they're getting things that you have on the list. We're trying to get more to the point of site recognition for a lot of this stuff. All right. And then the big thing, as you know, we all are involved with it, you know, as DOTs, and I was prior to coming to work for NTPEP, traceability. In other words, the identification or documentation that they get for items that they purchase, raw materials like nuts, bolts, and washers. For bearings, you know, you have sole plates and different steel items that are involved. And so they get that initial information and that initial documentation, and then somehow they have to keep up with the identification of that material through all the stages of fabrication. And then finally, when they go to furnish the item to the particular DOT, we look to see how they're able to go ahead and make sure that they furnish the right product or the right paperwork with that product to you in the field. So what we're not doing is we are not verifying Buy America. Okay. The DOTs are the ones tasked with that responsibility of verifying Buy America. But what we do try to verify is that they have full traceability on their items from the time they come in through their door after they order them, all the way on through the manufacturing process and out the door being shipped to the particular DOT project. Okay, thank you. And next, we take samples, and what we do is we choose some random samples, and what we're trying to be able to do is, this is product that the manufacturer says meets the specification. Okay, we're going to take some random samples, send them off to one of our NTPEP designated laboratories, have that material evaluated, and then we post the test results to determine whether or not indeed the product does meet. And that's why we choose the word very carefully. We have what we call a conformance sample. We verify that that the material is in close conformance with the work plan requirements. Okay. And for the particular product that we're talking about here, which is elastomeric bearings, we're looking at the elastomer properties, which are listed up there, your tensile, elongation, and so on. And of course, they will do temperature compression stiffness when a particular DOT is requiring that in their specification. You know, they'll go ahead and make those results available. And then on the finished pad, other than you know, just quick dimensional checks, they're doing shear modulus and checking those properties out. All right. So with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and now turn the presentation over to Mr. Matt Blumen, and he's going to discuss the elastomeric bearing information that is available to you on DataMine when you go on out there.
Thank you, Cyrus. So DataMine is the database tool that NetPEP uses to store all of our audit information and our product evaluation data. If you go to data.netpep.org, there's a lot of information that is available publicly. And then if you have a login as a state, you can see whatever technical committees you're interested in. So even if you're not utilizing NetPEP in any certain way, or for all committees, you can get login information from us. You just have to go to this website, register. We'll approve your account as a state member using your state email address, and you'll have access to all the proprietary data from the audits and from all of the product evaluations. So to be able to view things publicly, when you go to the website, you can click on any of the menu items at the top of the page. If you click on those committees, it will take you to each of the sections, and you can see all the manufacturers that are in NetPEP, and you can view their basic compliance, contact information, and things like that. So I just wanted to give a quick poll question first, so we can kind of gauge what we're dealing with on the call. So do you have a DataMine login credential? And if you aren't actively using that, make sure we know that as well. Okay, so we got about a third of you that don't have current DataMine accounts, a few that aren't sure. And if you're not sure if you have an account yourself, you can always email me or somebody at NetPEP, and we can determine that for you or reset your login information. And if you're not actively using your DataMine account, I'd encourage you to do so. And if you ever need help accessing anything, again, you can reach out to us and we can kind of guide you through the process. So I'm going to go through what type of information you can actually access on DataMine, and it's mostly going to relate to the audit programs, but the same type of navigation will apply if you go through any of the product evaluation programs as well. So when you're looking at the information on the public section, you can view everything as a status report that will show each of the facilities in the program. So this here is actually our elastomeric bridge bearing pad program. If you look under 2020, you can see all of the facilities that had audits and the status from those audits. So they're all listed as compliant here. And then as we work through this year, each of those facilities will be updated as well. We have filters and searches on the left-hand side of every page that you're on. And this comes in more handy for some of the bigger programs like steel or some of the product evaluation programs where there's a lot more manufacturers. So a little easier to narrow down with elastomeric bridge bearing pads because we don't have as many. When you go into a facilities page, even just with public access, you can see the NetPEP number. Each year has a unique NetPEP number for each facility. So you can view each year's separate audit information. And you can also see the compliance status and the audit date and who the auditor was in this public view. If you'll note at the bottom of that page, though, it will give you a message that you're not authorized to view these reports if you're not logged in as a state or that manufacturer. So the security of the system limits that information to all states and AASHTO staff or just that specific manufacturer. However, if you get login information, and the login looks like it does there on the bottom left, then you're able to see much more information, including the mailing address, phone numbers. This page here is the facility information. There's a few different tabs within each facility. And on the facility information tab, we house their quality manual and any pre-audit documentation that they submit to us, which usually includes the products that they supply and some of their processes and personnel. The audit information tab is where the meat of the data is that Sars was talking about. So you can see there's a few items here. When a facility is compliant, we give them a compliance authentication certificate, which basically lists that they are currently in a compliant status with us in good standing. Once the audit report is finalized, that gets uploaded, and I'll show you a couple of clips of that, but they can range anywhere from 10 to 20 or so pages. They include a lot of information, but the auditors do a great job of including a summary page on the first few pages of the report as well. So if you're trying to do a quick view just to see a little bit of the information, see if there were any major findings, you can always open it and just look through the first few pages and get a good idea. But it goes into great detail as well. If the audit produced any findings that require corrective action, we have the manufacturer fill out a corrective action report form as well, and that gets uploaded here so you can review those corrective actions. What our auditors do is review the corrective actions for completeness, but they don't actually approve or deny corrective actions unless it is completely missing the point. So that's actually up to you as states to look at and see if that would satisfy your needs. We include pictures of what the markings on their pads look like, so you can see what to expect if you're seeing pads from those manufacturers in the field, and the test results that Sars was talking about that include all of the results, and I'll show an example of that as well. So this is the basic information you'll see for an Elastomeric bridge bearing pad facility. For other programs, you might see slightly different things or more test results, but in general, this is what the view will look like. Here's a snippet from one of the audit reports. You can just see here a finding. This is in the summary section. So this is kind of the general overview of what a finding would look like. And it typically includes the corrective action along with it if something was addressed in that fashion. So you can always look through the summary and see things like this. And then what a lot of people are interested in is the test data. So this is what one of our test data reports looks like that we get back from the NTPEP testing laboratory, which is Phoenix National Laboratories in Phoenix. And here you can see the test results. If there are any failures, then the NTPEP lab will perform an automatic retest to verify before letting the manufacturer know of any failures. And if we receive failures on the original and the quick retest, we'll actually resample another pad from that manufacturer and upload those results as well, including any corrective action that comes from that failure. And that is everything that's available on the NTPEP data mine site. Again, for some of the programs, it goes into much more detail, but we're fairly simple with the Elastomeric bridge bearing pad program. And if there's any reasons of the information that we've shown you so far that wouldn't quite meet what you're looking for, we can always work within the committee to add anything to our test requirements or to the audit reports that would satisfy your needs as well. So I'm going to hand over to Joe Stillwell, who's going to start our discussion about why states should consider adopting the NTPEP bearing pad program if you aren't already.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Joe Stillwell. I am the fabrication engineer for Maine DOT. Looking at the attendees list, I know some of you. So why you should consider adopting NTPEP's Elastomeric bearing program. As you can tell, we did this in several chunks, so a lot of these things have already been covered. This is really what a baseline qualification for AASHTO M251 would be. AASHTO M251 is the specification that is referred to from the AASHTO design code and the AASHTO construction specification. So this is kind of like the equivalent of an AISC cert, a PCI cert, or SSPC, kind of that third-party verification once a year. What this does, it would put all of the bearing manufacturers kind of on the same playing field, and you know that anyone who has a passing audit at least has the baseline qualifications and processes in place to be able to successfully produce a bearing product for you. I know many states have shortages on staffing and resources, and this is one of those products that a lot of states just accept on certification. So adopting this program would allow you to give some validation to the certifications that you're getting, because you at least have a snapshot in time showing that, yes, the manufacturing facility has the traceability in place, so you can verify Buy America. Yes, they do check the Duro and load test everything as part of their quality control program. Additionally, if you are currently doing full-time inspection, you could potentially reduce it back to part-time. By using the audit, you can evaluate what the facility might be weak in or might be having issues in, so you can kind of target your inspection to a more critical spot where it is needed. Next, please, Matt. So now we're going to go into kind of the meat and potatoes of this. When you hear from myself, Aaron, and Carl from Texas on kind of how we utilize this in our states, and just kind of let you, because all three of us approach the use of this program all slightly differently. So this will let you see that this is not a one-stop shop fitting for you. You can kind of tweak it and how you utilize it to fit your own state and your own needs. So as I said, I'm the fabrication engineer for Maine DOT. So I am directly responsible for overseeing the fabrication of all pre-made items for any Maine DOT project. Elastomeric bearings are one of them. So this program directly impacts how I do my job and makes my life easier. So historically, Maine DOT has sent inspectors to either full-time or part-time to fab shops. And as you can see, every one of our bridge bearings is unique. This is just, these three bearings are three projects that were done in 2020. We got circular with masonry and sole plates, just a laminated pad with no metal, and then we got a bearing with a built-in bolster. One's metallized, one's painted, and no coating with the non-metal one. So we added the requirement for NTPEP audits as part of our 2020 spec book update. The rationale I used to get this in the spec book was it will provide an equal base qualification, so we won't get some fly-by-night outfit designing a complex bridge bearing that may or may not know what they're doing and not have any spec language to say, no, you can't do this. We're using the data anyway because we're active in AASHTO, and 99% of our suppliers, and now 100% of all of our bridge bearings, Elastomeric bridge bearing suppliers, are already using the program. And we require the use of third-party audits for, well, everything anyway. NPCA, PCI for concrete, SSPC or AISC third sophisticated paint for painting, AISC for steel. So it's just kind of, we do it anyway, so why not add another very important structural element. One of the nice things is all of the audit documents and quality control manuals are all in the same place. So I pull these reports and look at their corrective actions things. It kind of really helps me evaluate what the facility is lacking and kind of give my QA. All Maine, like everywhere else, is kind of hard to travel, especially now. So I use a lot of consultants, so I can give my consultants some targeted areas to make sure they verify some stuff. I'm currently doing like 10 to 12 hours a week now that we're doing this. So which is much more heavily focused on the coatings and welding of the elastomeric bearings, as these are not covered by the audit. These aren't covered by the audit process. So the Buy America, the coatings verification, all the material certs, because they are not covered in M251. M251 is really the fabrication of the elastomeric bearing itself. So just that rubber puck. And the way we view things, we need to get Buy America compliance on every project anyway. So we need to get verify the certs and while we're there. And at the end of the day, since we're only doing spot checks and we don't have any facilities or contract with a lab to do actual materials testing, our actual final acceptance is based on the certifications that we are presented with the bearings. It seems to work pretty well, and we have enough inspection there to verify that yes, the material certs that we and testing reports that we're getting are correct. They're not trying to pull a fast one on us. And next, I believe I'll be turning it over to Carl from Texas.
Okay, thank you, Joe. As you can see in the slide, we at TxDOT currently witness compression testing of all elastomeric bridge bearing pads. Now that photo actually shows the load testing of a bearing assembly. And what I mean by that is that not only do you have a laminated elastomeric bearing pad itself, but it's vulcanized to a top steel sole plate. Besides just the witnessing of the load test, and we also visually inspect the pads for defects. We perform dimensional measurements, and we also perform durometer hardness checks. So currently, we have a very involved, intensive inspection program at TxDOT at these bearing shops. Now, like Joe said, in Maine they have this program, I think, in their specifications already. But we are in the process of adopting the NTPEP program for all these elastomeric bridge bearing pad manufacturers. We already have third-party audits ourselves, like Joe mentioned. They have in their states that we require third-party audits, like through ACPA, NCPA, and AISC. So we felt that it was time for us to go with these third-party audits for this material also. And you know, what do we think we're going to gain from this? Well, I'm probably going to echo some of what Joe had mentioned previously, but by adopting this program in our specifications, this will allow us to reduce the amount of inspection that we currently perform with our limited resources. We intend to review the plant's quality manual in order to occasionally check on our part if there's a concerted effort by the plant to follow it. We also, when adopting this program, we're also going to intend to review the NTPEP audit reports that SARS mentioned. When reviewing these reports, we want to observe any shortcomings in a plant's quality control practices, and to follow up with the plant when issues are identified during these audits. In other words, we plan to verify that these plants will follow up on their corrective actions that they state that they will perform in their replies on discrepancy findings in the audits. And I guess with that, I'll pass it on to Aaron.
Thanks, Carl. So I'll share a little bit about how Wisconsin DOT uses the EBB program as well. So on this slide on the right side, you'll see an image of our current approved fabricators list, and below the table and sort of blown up on the screen, is our reference to the requirement to be NTPEP compliant in order to gain access to this list. If manufacturers aren't on this list, they're not eligible to be providing products to our projects. Historically, our state has had the resourcing constraints that most of us have felt, and it led us not to really have an exhaustive QA program for a number of highway components, and bridge bearings is one of them. The EBB program allowed us to obtain audit information with no additional expense or resource demand to the department. As has been referenced multiple times, we're active in AASHTO, so we have access to this information. So we're able to improve our QA process through the reviews of the information that we get through these audits and involvement with the TC. We were able to initially compile an APL back in 2018. So prior to 2018, WSDOT didn't have a formalized process for obtaining information on the quality processes utilized by these manufacturers. On a project by project basis, we reviewed, and oftentimes, more than I'd like to admit, we didn't really review, but simply rubber stamped the cert information that was submitted along with materials at the job site. So again, ultimately, the bottom line for WSDOT is that we've been able to utilize the information that was already available to us to create an approved products list, ultimately enhancing, to a significant degree, WSDOT's ability to ensure quality products make it into our projects. Next slide, Matt. So now that we've gotten a better feel for the program, the audit process, and have heard from a number of different states on how they use the program, we'd like to get some feedback before we wrap up on what items or issues are holding you all back from adopting the program potentially within your states. Next slide. So to get answers for that question, we have one more poll question. If your state does not utilize the NTPEP audits for elastomeric bridge bearings, what is the reason for this stance? We understand that there's probably many reasons, but if you could answer the poll on this slide with the closest response, we'd appreciate it. I should say for those states that do utilize the program, you don't need to answer. All right, a good distribution. So that information will be helpful moving forward for us. Next slide, Matt. So we do have a number of audits scheduled in the early part of 2021. So if being able to be virtually present at one or multiple of these audits would help you in determining whether the NTPEP audit program can benefit your state, we'd like to assist you in getting involved in this way. On the screen, there are multiple contacts of people to reach out to in order to get the schedules for these audits. Of specific note, I want to let you know that there will be a partial virtual audit of the DS Brown facility in Texas on March 16th, as well as a fully virtual audit at the Cosmic facility in Texas on March 17th. So again, there will be multiple others throughout the year. So if those don't work for you, feel free to reach out, and I'm sure we can find one that will fit within your schedule. Next slide. So while our main push in this webinar was to provide background and generate interest in getting involved with the EBB program, we'd also like to make you all aware of how your state can get involved or more involved with NTPEP as a whole. So this slide outlines 5 different opportunities for you and your state to get more involved. It includes, visiting the DataMine website that Matt talked about earlier, contacting NTPEP staff for additional information, getting yourself involved in TCs that interest you, attending an audit, as I just referenced. Probably most importantly, getting your state to adopt NTPEP programs within your specs. Next slide. few other ways that you can get involved include joining the NetPEP membership program, which includes multiple different options, getting more engaged with NetPEP through our data usage surveys, championing NetPEP for your state, and doing the work to expose more of your counterparts to the benefit of NetPEP, amongst other things. There are likely many, many more ways, but just wanted to throw out a few for your consideration today. Next slide. And one last reminder of a few key website links for you to do some additional research, including the NetPEP and DataMine websites. I'll now turn it back over to Bill to provide a few more bits of information as part of the webinar before we wrap up.
Thanks, Aaron. So that's great. We've heard a lot of good stuff here. We discussed the NetPEP program in general and some of the benefits realized by using NetPEP. We know now that there are opportunities here to save money and manpower. We also know that there are opportunities to improve your QA by having access to testing and facility audits that you may not have the ability to perform yourself. We learned about the NetPEP audit process, and in particular, the EBB audit program. We covered the data mine module for elastomeric bridge bearings and showed you how to obtain the audit documentation. And we heard 3 examples of how other states are or plan to benefit from using the NetPEP for elastomeric bridge bearings. Next slide, please. I want to reiterate what Aaron said about joining a technical committee. It's really a pretty low, not a high commitment. You can have the opportunity to help shape the program to be of the most value to you and other states. It gives you an opportunity to interact with your peers in industry. Some people think they can't join if they can't travel. You don't have to be able to travel to be part of a technical committee. Also, I also want to encourage you to attend an audit, and it can be a virtual one or an in-person one. Aaron just gave you some contact names to let them know if you want to attend. And I don't think it matters so much which product category the audit is for. The idea is to give you an opportunity to see how the NetPEP audit process works and to give you a sense of the value of the NetPEP audits. Also want to stress again, I can't say this enough, you really should have data mine login credentials and use them every time you log in. You don't really know what you're missing for information if you're not logged in. NetPEP versus independent testing. I know that there's a lot of cases, and many of you consider NetPEP testing to be an acceptable source of independent testing. As we said earlier in the presentation, the NetPEP product evaluations and facility audits are performed as per work plans that have been approved by your states. They've been performed by testing facilities and auditors that work for NetPEP, and you guys are all members of NetPEP. To me, all of this would seem to suggest that the testing and auditing that NetPEP provides is in effect an extension of your own capabilities rather than just another source of independent testing. So I encourage you all to look at your qualification processes to see where using NetPEP may be an improvement over accepting some form of independent testing. And again, NetPEP is your best source for unbiased product evaluations and manufacturing facility audits. Next slide, please. A couple slides back, Aaron gave you a website address for the NetPEP homepage. That's what you see on your screen right now. I wanted to point out that there's a link in the blue column on the left for technical committees. You can find the technical committee web pages there. On those web pages, you can find the work plans describing the various evaluations and or audits. You can find who the technical committee members are, and you can find user guides to provide guidance on how to use the data that's provided here. Down below where it says NetPEP webinars, there's a link there for the YouTube channel, NetPEP's YouTube channel. There's some really good stuff there. The recording for this webinar will be there along with other webinars we've had in the past. There's a really good 25-year anniversary webinar that starts playing as soon as you open the page. That's a good webinar to watch. Very good. Also, the map in the middle of the page, if you click on that, it'll open up a fully functional spreadsheet that is a user survey. Most of you probably heard from me trying to gather information from this. It's updated continually. You might want to look here to see what other programs your state is using successfully, and you might be able to talk to the people who are involved from your state to get a sense of how they've benefited from it. Like I say, this spreadsheet is updated all the time, and you can send any corrections or updates to me. I put my email address down in the bottom right-hand corner. I'd like to hear from you if you have anything to help me with that information. Next slide, please. And we want to make sure that everybody knows that the NTPEP annual meeting has been rescheduled till late fall. It'll be the week of October 31st in Newport, Rhode Island. Hope we'll see you all there. I guess at this point we can take questions and answers if there's any. I'm going to pass that to Matt.
Yeah, so first I'll just go through the questions that were asked in the Q&A box, and a few of those were already covered a little bit. Somebody asked about Buy America and why it's not included as part of our audit review for this program, where it is for others. And I think Joe highlighted that, but if there's any more comments on that, you can raise your hand and ask a little further. But the main reason is that this program is focused on the elastomeric portion of those pads. And even in the other programs, we try to evaluate their methodology for ensuring that traceability and making sure the Buy America traceability goes all the way through to the project. But we never approve the Buy America completely, since again, that's going to be project to project approval type thing. And it's definitely something you want to verify for your projects. Then Susan Barker asked if there's a way to know what states use the program, and Bill just highlighted that on our main page. But we did have a slide earlier in the presentation that I can go back to really quick that shows that as well. But for any of the programs, if you go to that map on our home page, you can find, sorry, I can't talk and act at the same time. Here we go. So the highlighted states on here are the ones that currently are members. Sorry, you'd have to go to the homepage to view which states actually utilize. And I'll show you how to use the spreadsheet really quick because it can get a little confusing. So this spreadsheet again covers every single program that we have. So you want to go to the filter and select whichever program you're looking for. And you can see which states utilize, so you can sort. So Pennsylvania allows the program in lieu of something else. And then we have a few that are required at the bottom: Alabama, Illinois, Iowa, Massachusetts, North Carolina, Tennessee, and Wisconsin. And Joe, we need to update Maine. So we do update these lists fairly frequently. Bill's the person that will reach out to your states. And you can also see who the contact is for each of those states that we have on file. So if you ever look through this and note that somebody else should be listed, please let us know. And that is useful for you as states and for the manufacturers to access. A couple of other questions in there. Felix asked, can Canadian agencies participate in NTPEP? You can. The only thing you're not allowed to do is vote whenever it comes to work plan changes, but including manufacturers, everyone that's in committees can give feedback, provide suggestions, things like that. As far as utilizing NTPEP for an approval type thing, we can talk about that if you want a little bit further. So if you want to reach out to me after this, we can see how NTPEP could possibly work for you. One of the biggest differences is that since states are members of AASHTO, they have a different type of access when they log into DataMine. So that's probably the one thing we have to work out, is how to deal with your login information. So please just reach out to me afterwards for any of the Canadian facilities that are online. Tim McCullough asked, is there an appropriate contact with the NTPEP to discuss creating a NTPEP program? An example, vehicular pedestrian bridges. There is, and it is actually called the NTPEP Product Implementation Task Force. It takes all suggestions from states and determines where the best place for that is. So they would take that into their own committee and vote whether that would be best suited to have its own committee, if it would fit in a currently existing committee as just a different item, or if it would belong in what was formerly called APEL or Upcubed, which is proprietary products, unique or proprietary products that might be sort of a one-off type of thing, such as like fiberglass rebar that doesn't really fit within a program. There's not going to be a large amount of usage and a lot of states utilizing it, but it's something that either one or two states might want to see something. Kenny said that he's having a hard time getting some of his new employees who may replace him in the future to get data mine login credentials. If they're having a hard time registering on data mine, you can always have them reach out to me or any other NetPEP staff. If it's a case of convincing them to join, then we have webinars like this for other programs every once in a while. You can always have them join in on the webinars to learn more about it and why they should use those credentials. But any state can go on data.netpep.org and just create a registration. And then if they're not getting approved, again, just reach out to us and we can go in because we have to approve all logins inside of that system. And the last question here is why NetPEP is not in sync with TSP2 program, which requires using lots of products, or you're going to add these products to your list. Followed, if you want to maybe unmute and verbally ask that question so we can.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, this is for Jabber, Nebraska. So with the preservation, which is good, a lot of product over there, we are going to state we like to use the NetPEP for our approved list, but a lot of product at least we use for preservation. I didn't see it in there for a lot of reason. I don't know, and that's what I'm asking is, are you going to expand to use all these products, or am I missing something here?
Well, so typically the products go through that NetPEP product implementation task force first. So that usually we have to have a state that comes to us and says like, this is what we want. Because we won't create a program until we have enough states that come to us and see a need for it. So typically we want somewhere around 10 states to say, we have a need for an evaluation, either a product evaluation or audit evaluation of this product or these manufacturers. And then again, we would determine at that point if it would fit in a current program, if we have to create a new one, or what avenue NetPEP could help out. And you know, there are cases where we've said this just doesn't seem like it's going to fit within NetPEP, or the demand doesn't seem like it's going to be big enough for NetPEP to be able to support it. But your best bet is again to take that to the NetPEP implementation task force, and you can email anybody at NetPEP if you're interested in pitching any products or programs and things like that. If there's any other questions, if you want to raise your hands, I can unmute you, or you can type them into the Q&A box there. I'm not seeing any. So thank you for joining in. Again, this recording will be available on YouTube if you'd like to forward it to any of your colleagues. We'll send out a link to it whenever it's available on YouTube to everybody that participated on the webinar. And again, if you have any other questions, feel free to reach out to anybody in the committee, the chairs or myself, and we'd be happy to answer any other questions or assist you in adopting the program, or even if it is with other products or new items or things like that. So once again, thank you for joining, and have a good day.